$163,671 per month in revenue just with Bing ads alone. That's exactly what we scaled this e-commerce brand to. And in this video, I'm going to give you the exact step-by-step strategy on exactly how we made it happen. Now, this is a very interesting case study for me because Bing ads, Microsoft ads, are one of the most overlooked ad platforms out there when it comes to e-commerce brands. This case study right here goes to show you that when you have the right approaches, when you have the right strategies compared to similar ad platforms, in this situation, Google, things can start to scale very, very quickly. And the reason why I mentioned Google Ads for this brand is because we started working on the Google Ads side of things for this brand under my Google Ads agency, Euro Marketing, roughly in September of 2024. We were able to really scale this brand to the next level on Google Ads. In the last 30 days, it has done roughly $1 million in revenue at a 3.36x ROAS just from Google. However, finding this success from Google really allowed us to figure out what the right approach for Microsoft Bing ads would be, because the thing is, this strategy right here on Bing is very, very similar to what we did initially for this brand on Google Ads. But before any of that, let's take a step back and understand this brand a little bit more in detail. So this is a brand which sells bedroom-related products, specifically certain types of bed sheets. Now, overall, this brand relies just on Google ads and Bing ads alone at this time. Very few sales come from Facebook ads, whereas just about 4, 5, 6 months ago, this brand was heavily relying on Facebook ads. Now, the reason why this brand didn't really want to rely on Facebook ads was because the average order value for this brand is roughly $357. And in this situation, Facebook ads works better for products that are around $100 AOV or $200 maximum. But when it gets to a little bit more of the mid-ticket, high-ticket range, that's when products in this niche start to really struggle on the Facebook ad side of things, which is why this brand was running at barely a 2x break-even ROAS on Facebook for so long. Now, overall, this brand at this point of time does 1 million to 1.5 million per month in revenue. But if we go on over to Google, because on Bing ads, this is a fairly newer type of brand, which we have just recently started getting results on. But from the Google Ads side of things, this brand really started scaling during 2024, early 2024. We started work in September, which is when we essentially blew up this brand. But before that period, prior to that period, the brand was actually not doing that well. It was not a well-known brand, and it was just trying to get its foot through the door, essentially. So if we go on over to conversion value, for instance, we can see during that time, it was doing roughly 100,000, 200,000 Australian dollars a month in revenue. Still not a bad amount. However, it was not anywhere close to the profitability levels it is at this point of time. But essentially, what we found on the Google Ads side of things at the start, which directly related to the Bing ads, is simple strategies work the best. At this point of time, we have roughly 12 different campaigns running. However, when we first started on Google Ads in September, October, we really were only testing around with 3 to 4 campaigns maximum. And that's because this brand only has a select few SKUs that are running at this point of time. So the majority of the focus for us, at least, was on this search campaign, which was a dynamic search campaign during that time. And then this performance max campaign, which held all of those 3 to 4 SKUs. Everything else was either branded search or targeting a different country with a performance max campaign. But that's essentially what we found first results with. And that was what led us to the Bing ad side of things. Now, if we take a closer look at Bing ads during the time that it has been running, we can see Bing ads really started to take up during Q3 of 2024. That's when we actually started focusing on it later on in October and November. But in October, in Q3 of 2024, we spent 30,000 Australian dollars to make back 170,000. And Q4 was when we spent $54,000 to make back $436,000. So this is when we really came in and started scaling on the Bing ad side of things. Now, because we were able to scale during Q4, get a lot of good data, now as you can see, the ROAS has really increased by 10-fold. It went from this level of ROAS, which was around the 8x, 9x ROAS, to now almost a 10x ROAS. And Q1 just started, and we're already at almost $250,000 in revenue. Now, one of the first steps that we took in order to really increase these sales to this level is not by starting out with the campaigns directly. Instead, what we did is we took a step back and started to work from the foundations. Now, the reason why I love Google Ads and running Bing Ads side by side is because both of these essentially work together. They work hand in hand and react to the same things in a similar manner. So like Google Ads, there's something called the Bing Ads Merchant Center, which you can find on the left-hand side right here. The Merchant Center contains the product feed for all of your products on Bing, just like the Google Merchant Center does on the Google Ads. And this means you need to ensure your Merchant Center, first of all, does not have too many issues. These rejected products, they should be a bare minimum. But second, you should have a Merchant Center that's optimized similarly to what you would do on the Google Ads side of things. So here, we also have the product feed with all types of product title, SEO keywords in there, perceived value increasing words, etc., product images, making sure they're the opposite of the competitors. All the same things as you would do on Google, we did on Bing Ads. And in addition, we had promotions during that time running to really make our ads stand out. Because when you go on Bing.com, for instance, and you type in the major keyword within this niche, which essentially is just bed sheets, what we can find is there were not a lot of competitors during that time. So for instance, the same brand, just like in this situation, Pottery Barn or Quinn's or something else, the same brand was coming up 3-4 times within these shopping listings. And that's actually a good thing to see, because what that means is there's not too much competition at this point of time. And that means you can enter the market and very easily beat these competitors. What you don't want to see is what you see right here, where every single listing is by a different brand, because this tells you that it's extremely competitive. So initially during our research phase, that's what we saw on Bing. It was the same brands coming up 3-4 times. The reality was we only were dealing with 2, 3, 4 major competitors, which was a good thing. Now, I say this because we've done the similar approach to about 400 other brands which we work with under my agency Euro Marketing, which, by the way, if you run a brand doing $50,000 per month in revenue or more and you need extra help scaling with Google and Bing Ads, go onto my website at euromarketing.com and schedule a free call with me, and let's see if we can potentially work together and make that happen. But the approach here is fairly simple. The first campaign right here, running at $500 a day budget, is that same dynamic search campaign which we found initial success with on the Google Ads side. But here's the interesting thing. The ROAS on the Google Ads side during that time was around a 2.51x. Right now, for this campaign alone, we are running at an overall return on ad spend of 436%. That's almost 2x of what levels we were finding on the Google Ads side of things, which is absolutely great because it's the same exact keyword, same exact approach. It's also a dynamic search campaign. Now, this is running on a target ROAS approach, which is a smart bidding based approach with a target ROAS of 350%. Just because 350 works here doesn't mean you should also go out and copy that same exact approach, by the way. But what you do want to kind of do with your own strategy and your own approach on the Bing Ads is have sort of multiple different ad groups running. That's essentially what ended up working for us here. As you can see, our quality score is extremely high because we used Google Ads to do all of our creative testing. So we knew which keywords worked the best, what ad copies the users responded to, etc. So it was a matter of just going in and adding in the right kinds of keywords. So all these keywords were essentially focused on 2 different approaches. First is exact match type, and the second is the phrase match type. These are the only 2 I recommend on Bing in terms of the strategy, because this is what gives the Bing algorithm the ability to go out and find a sort of a broad approach, a broad audience, but at the same time be narrow enough to know exactly what it should be going after in terms of the keywords. But in addition to that, with that out of the way, what we went to from that dynamic search campaign was the shopping campaign. Now, in this situation, this is actually a simple enhanced CPC, meaning a manual bidding standard shopping campaign. In my experience, running a smart bidding based shopping campaign, or even like performance max campaigns, because you do have the ability to run those kinds of campaigns on Bing as well. If you go on over to creating a campaign, you can see I have the ability to actually make performance max campaign tab, which in my experience is not ideal on Bing because it just does not have that level of smartness that the Google Ads algorithm does. So taking a standard shopping campaigns is really the best way to go here. But what we did essentially is for the bids, we found out what the perfect bid is based on our Google ad result. So here, what we saw is that the average cost per link click is around $4 Australian. Now, what we knew is Bing has about half of the competition as Google. This was not something we were able to kind of quantify, but just based on what we saw in the search listing, we were able to kind of come up with the conclusion that there's about 50% less competition. So what we did is for the enhanced CPC bids themselves, we also started with 50% less bids, around $2, $2.15, $2.50, so on and so forth. And that actually ended up working like a charm because right now it's actually starting to just kicked in terms of the overall approaches. In the last 30 days, we are looking at a 310% ROAS. So there's ups and downs with shopping campaigns on Bing, which is to be expected, but overall, this is running at a very profitable ROAS, and the CPC is actually starting to drop. It's actually dropping much more to about 1/3 of what it is on the Google Ads side of things. So third approach we have here is a search campaign, another search campaign, but going after different countries. So the first campaign, the dynamic search, was for the United States only. This third one is for Canada, Australia, United Kingdom, and New Zealand. And normally on Google Ads, I don't recommend you basically put all of these countries together. However, on the Microsoft Bing Ads side of things, you can get away with doing that because the competition is even lower in these other top tier countries like Australia, Canada, United Kingdom, etc. compared to United States. So as you can see, we're actually running at a very similar ROAS to the dynamic search campaign of 503%. And the second reason why this is beneficial, grouping countries on Bing, is because first of all, these other countries, barely anybody's using Bing in these other countries. It's mostly the USA from what I see. But grouping them together now increases that audience pool and that audience size. So now you can target bigger pockets of the audience overall and get more sales as a result, because otherwise you'll barely be getting any sales. But finally, the fourth campaign right here is a branded search campaign. Fairly straightforward. We're running it at a very low bid and a very low spend. As you can see, barely $500 spent, but 57,000 in revenue. That's almost 100x ROAS, not a 10x ROAS, but 100x. Yes, I said that right. So that's the beauty of Bing. Barely any composition. You can get away with spending very little money on branded search. And I still recommend you do this because what happens is on Bing, you still have a few competitors who, if they see that you are essentially doing well on Bing Ads, you're ranking high initially for these listings, they will start to do something called competitor search campaigns where they start to bid on your branded keyword. So to prevent these brands from stealing your traffic, you need to essentially be running these kinds of brand keys campaigns. But finally, we have a competitor search campaign going after what some of our biggest competitors out there. And although it's not getting the most amount of revenue, it's not really generating the most amount of traffic, it is still doing fairly good at a 16x ROAS. So that's why we continue to let it run. But all of these campaigns combined with a very simple approach, very straightforward. As you can see, it's only really a 4 to 5 campaign approach, nothing too crazy going on. But even then, we're running at a 711% or 7x ROAS, doing $160,000 in revenue per month. Now, in terms of the scaling and the long-term approach to Bing Ads, overall from what I've seen, you want to, again, keep things simple because the Bing Ads algorithm, first of all, it's not as smart as the Google Ads algorithm. The moment you introduce too much with Bing, the moment you start to introduce overlap, and when there's overlap on Bing, it's not as smart as Google. It's going to basically destroy itself and destroy all of this momentum as a result because you now start bidding against yourself on Bing Ads. But to prevent that from happening, we're sticking to vertical scaling only. So when we initially started, these budgets were nowhere close to $1,300 per day. It was more on the $200 to $300 per day. But once we started seeing some momentum, some traction, we started increasing a little bit aggressively here every 3 to 5 days by 20% to 30% in the ad spend on a daily basis. And that's what got us overall to these levels of ad spend, where on a daily basis, we are doing 2,000 to 3,000, all the way up to even 10,000 on some days with Bing Ads, which is absolutely insane because most brands don't even utilize Bing. So that's why I personally believe Bing Ads is one of the best approaches you can take if you already have Google Ads running. And even if you don't, I still do believe Bing Ads can scale your brand to the very next level like it did here. But again, if you run a brand doing 50,000 or more per month in revenue, you need some extra help scaling with Bing and Google Ads. Go on to my website at yourmarketing.com, schedule a free call with me, and let's see if we can potentially work together and make that happen.